let's stop drawing lines between one another and love one another. Figure out how to love everyone. Like that's the paradox of community.
David, it's,
Hey,
it's good to have you here, man. Good to have you on the podcast.
good to be here.
Yeah.
Mia and Brooke
It-
and everybody out there who's listening.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's time we had you on. We were talking before we hit record about the fact that our audience would be familiar with you, but excited to have this conversation, man. You've been influential in this audience for sure. So
Oh, that's good to know. It's encouraging.
Yeah.
You know, I kind of live a hermit's life up here in northern Canada, and I fly under the radar here locally, really.
right.
And so,
That's fair.
when you say, there's a lot of people who appreciate what I do, that's really encouraging because I don't know unless somebody tells me.
Yeah. You're a prophet in your hometown. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah,
So
that
it
could be
sounds
why
like.
I lay low, 'cause what happens to the prophets, right?
Man, it's good to have you on, and we're gonna jump into some of what you do. But for those who may be unfamiliar, share a little bit. You're Canadian. We've already heard the about,
Yeah.
some of the accent. I'm a fellow Canadian, so it's good to connect that way. But share a little bit about who you are and what you're doing.
Okay, well, I'll give a thumbnail sketch. So I was raised in Canada, grew up in a Christian home, and my dad was a cop who was transferred all around, and so we were never dedicated to any denomination or anything. We just went to whatever church, and so I grew up without feeling any allegiance to any one denomination or
Yeah.
theology. But I call myself my own ecumenical movement because I've been in so many different churches and denominations, and to me, that's no big deal. I went to I got saved, in a Baptist church as a teenager. Then we switched almost right away to a Pentecostal church. I went to a Pentecostal Bible college in the United States.
Uh-huh.
Met my wife Lisa. We went to seminary, Gordon Conwell, and then
Okay.
my goal was to be a New Testament scholar. I was taking Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic and all the languages, and then started my PhD at the University of Toronto, and then we got pregnant. So
Yeah.
we couldn't afford to keep going in that direction. I ended up, I was offered a position as a pastor, and I took it.
Right.
So I kind of landed accidentally in the ministry, and then I ended up getting ordained in the Presbyterian Church in Canada. Served that church for many years, and then I ended up in the Vineyard Church. I don't know if you've heard of
Yeah,
that.
I'm familiar. Yeah.
And that's where I closed out my ministry days in 2010. I left the ministry. Now,
Uh-huh.
in 2005, I already started my blog, Naked Pastor, and I call it Naked Pastor because I just wanted to be a pastor who was blogging and sharing everything without hiding anything. I was just going to be raw and real,
Right.
transparent, vulnerable, authentic, all
Yeah.
That's
that.
great.
Yeah.
And
It's also
so I
good for
did.
marketing.
Yeah.
It also is very intriguing and probably.
Well, the naked pastor thing has been a thorn in my side. I said, I can't access Naked Pastor. I'm like, where are you? And I'm at the public library. Well, that's
That's why.
why. Or I'm a teacher in an elementary school. Well,
Yeah.
why?
That's why.
Anyway, it's not so bad these days. Although it does seem America's getting more prudish these days. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering what direction things are going to go. Anyway, I left the ministry 2010, and I decided, okay, let's see if I can make Naked Pastor a full-time gig,
Yeah.
because it was becoming more and more popular because of my cartoons. And then it worked. So that's what I've been doing full-time ever since.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
So that's my story in a nutshell.
So the artist in you has always been. So you're a right and left brain. You've probably figured out how to function pretty well if you've got working on a PhD while also doing the drawing.
Well, I can function there.
Yeah,
I have a lot more fun
yeah,
in the art realm, but
yeah,
I I I do love engaging with ideas though, and I find that my cartoons, my art,
yeah,
has a way of bypassing people's defenses and their
Yes.
rationales and
Mm-hmm.
everything.
yeah,
And I think that's why I stuck with it. I just decided in 2006, I'm going to try and draw a cartoon. I've been drawing my whole life, but I thought I'm going to try a cartoon, see what happens. And they just took off. And
right.
they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, and I really do believe it, that I can draw one picture in one frame,
Yeah,
maybe no words, and people get the idea like that, and it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
You can't even see it. You know what I mean? It's
yeah,
that fast and impacting. And so I stuck with it. And yeah, that's what I'm doing. I do a cartoon every day,
do you?
and yeah, and I love what they do.
Yeah, it's the arts. I'm more right-brained. I'm a storyteller. We work on films, my brother and I. So,
Oh,
to
cool.
me, the idea that you can tell a story or draw a painting or a picture or a song,
Yeah,
all of those ways that you can learn in that space within you, that heart space within you, almost the burning place that I think was taking place on the Emmaus Road. That kind of
yeah, yeah, yeah.
knowing here before your head catches up, it can really it can kind of get in there, and it's definitely what a whole
Yeah,
lot of what you do.
it's when you read the gospel stories about Jesus, and his style
Yeah,
was basically, I think, just a storyteller. He
yeah,
told parables
yeah,
and
yeah,
assumed that people who got it would infer their meaning. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
so he wasn't like, this is what this story means.
yeah,
It
yeah,
was like, I don't know, there's something, I think about this a lot.
yeah,
That's why I often post a cartoon and I don't explain it, because
yeah.
I
Beautiful.
want the person, this is a big thing to do with deconstruction too. I want
Mm-hmm.
you to be able to infer
Yeah.
your own meaning without me having to tell you how to think about it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
and it empowers you, and it gives you the authority to decide what
Yeah.
you think about it. So,
Yeah, what I like about it too, it's very disarming, but at the same time it's very provoking. So it's to me it's like it's one hand or the other, but at the same time.
yeah.
And I love it. I love the authenticity of it. I love just the it's like saying things that people are thinking, but they're not sure if they can say it,
Hmm.
and just like the freedom that you walk in that. And I think it's just a good example of that freedom. And like, okay, well, you might be thinking this, so I'm just going to go ahead and draw it for you. Or you may not have language for what you're thinking, and I'm going to
Yeah.
draw it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I like um, how immediate they are. Like, I used to, when I first started nakedpastor.com and I was a pastor blogger, I was writing wordy posts every day. And then when I realized I could draw in one frame what I was trying to convey, and maybe not even have words, uh, and that it was the response was more immediate. Like, I mean, people consumed it like that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
instantaneous. And I just love that effect that it has on people. Some people find them provocative and
Sure.
don't like that. They they just find them too
Are you,
offensive or wrong.
yeah.
So,
Are you
but
saying that there have been people that didn't like your art?
oh yeah, I don't know where the balance is. I don't know if
Uh,
more dislike or like, but
yeah.
I get about a fair share of really negative feedback or comments or
Yeah.
hate mail or whatever, but I once in a while I hear people who've really have found them positive
Yeah.
change, positive change in their life and encouraged and
Yeah.
feel validated and seen and heard. And
That's it.
so that to me is worth it.
I love Brooks using the idea that we don't put language or we don't have language for something. And often I think what art does is it actually lets us access the truth before we can put words to it. And
Yeah.
then we go chase down that truth and eventually figure out how to put words to it. It's almost like that's the last stage in understanding. I'll say
Yeah.
this because I agree with you. I left Bible college, couldn't make that suit fit at all, and started a band. So like I did the complete opposite and started playing in clubs and night and bars and but I remember the first song I wrote, it meant so much to me at 15 and I recorded it and somebody came a couple of years later and said, "Oh, that song," and they started telling me what the lyrics meant to them and I corrected them because they got it wrong. And I watched that person deflate. And that was, I realized right then, never do that again. That song landed because it spoke to their subjective experience. That was more powerful than what it meant to me, is what it could mean to others through their own experience. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
definitely feel that on what you do and make room for folks.
Well, it's interesting because like I'll often get a comment on one of my cartoons. Like I know I do a cartoon every day, and I don't claim to hit a home run every time.
Sure.
But once in a while, I do hit a home run.
Yes.
But I always check with my wife, who's on the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to
Good job.
humor and things. Her humor is totally different and all that kind of thing. And she's a very private person, and
It's my wife. Yeah.
so I'll say, "What do you think of this cartoon?" And she'll go, "I don't get it." And that'll send me back to the drawing board
That's
because
great.
I want it to be clear. But yeah, it's funny how. But I'll hear from some people saying, "What does this mean?" And I'll say, what I do is I say, "Well, what does it mean to you? Like, what do you think it means?"
Yeah.
It's good.
And they'll say, "Well, this is what I think it means." I say, "Well, what's wrong with that? Like,
Yeah.
that's
Right.
awesome."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because this is how we're raised in church
Yeah.
or most authority structures, is this is what it means,
Yes.
and you need to subscribe to that meaning. And a big part of deconstruction is getting out from under the weight of authority
Come
and
on.
discovering your own self autonomy and determination and independence and being able to say, I like this, and this is what it means to me, with courage.
Amen.
So
Yeah.
that's why I always put it back in their lap and let them decide what it means to them.
One of my favorite pieces of yours that I'm trying to figure out a place to put it, is the one, to me, it's a woman. I don't know if it is, but it looks like a woman. And walking from religion into freedom and the color change and and it just says religion and freedom. That says so much just, but
Yeah.
in that. And I'm like, I looked at that and I'm like, oh, I can feel that. I felt that.
Yeah.
I
That's
felt
cool.
that because,
Yeah.
yes.
Life's got way more color and life and vibrancy. I did that as a commission, actually. Somebody said, "I want to give a gift to my wife. I'd love one of your cartoons." And so it is a woman in that case. But
It looked like one.
he said she's deconstructed and really has gotten free of religion and all that. And can you convey that somehow?
You
And
did.
that's what came to my mind was
I love it.
not a black and white color.
Come on.
Yeah.
I love that, and I want to yes and the way that you make room for interpretation. It's Jesus saying, "Who do you say that I am? Who do the people say that I am?"
Oh, I love that.
It's the invitation for us to perceive him, and for him to celebrate the way we see him. When
Yeah.
Peter actually discovers that he's the Christ. I think that that's the way love would navigate. I think, and you tell me, I think your signature piece, at least for me, as I look at all that you do, and you probably. I feel like if there's one thing you're doing, for me, I've written a handful of books. Trust is my through line. It doesn't matter what I'm running at. I'm ultimately going to be speaking to the nature of God as being trustworthy, because you can't have connection where there isn't trust. And so he's always good, so we can trust him, therefore we have connection. So trust is my through line. I feel like the through line that you're pushing at, and you can tell me, and it's probably seen in this picture where Jesus has a pencil, it's upside down,
Yeah.
and he's got an eraser on one end, and he's erasing boxes, while all the other people in this picture have a pencil and they're drawing boxes. I feel like your through line is that you are speaking to, and specifically within the church, and I think this is, you shared, you're well suited even based on the early days, and being a pastor, you're speaking to hierarchies of exclusion, the idea that there's us and them, for and against, insiders and outsiders, that none of that is the gospel, that Jesus walked and talked. And I feel like, you can tell me, but I feel like that piece, that message is woven into almost everything you do. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, what more can be said? I mean, that's exactly what I'm trying to convey. I remember there's a verse, I think it's Ephesians, where it says, "There's therefore now no dividing wall between us." And I thought, how can I draw that? And that's the image that came to my mind, was us drawing lines between ourselves
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Jesus with the eraser erasing those lines, and everybody's around him is perturbed by his actions. But I was just trying to convey what I thought was a biblical truth,
Yeah.
and you know, I think it's pretty accurate. That's what I am going for. That's why I think my cartoons kind of have a double edge to them, where on the one hand I'm going after authority structures or systems or people, not maybe personally, but the kind of people that would subjugate others and dominate others and oppress others and marginalize and
Yeah.
exclude
Yeah.
and excommunicate and all that. So I go after that like a Rottweiler. Like I go after that
Yes,
because
you
I've
do.
been a victim of that. I've been a part of the system that promoted that. And now I'm more on the side of the people who are marginalized and excluded and ridiculed and rebuked and all those things. So the people who are feeling left out and marginalized and so on love my stuff.
Sure.
But the
Yeah.
people who are trying to keep control and manage everybody hate it. They hate it. And I think deep down inside, it's because some of them know it's true. And so that's why yeah, you're right on. Good analysis, which I appreciate that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let me ask
That's
you.
called Eraser, by the way, that cartoon.
Eraser.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
so. Yeah, if you're looking it up, guys, it's called Eraser.
Eraser.
Eraser, ER. Yeah.
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 Brooke, I've got. Unless you're.
Go ahead.
No, it's all right. I don't want to.
Let's hear from Brooke.
Well, one of the things I was curious about, because I went onto your blog and I was reading, you're very talented at writing as well, and very, very nicely done on several of your blogs. And I'm curious about, because you're talking about you've experienced some of this stuff yourself, the isolation, all of that, and I'm sure you have your own deconstruction story. But I'm curious how you were able to. I'm still trying to formulate my thoughts on this, but how you were able to move past a lot of that. Because I think sometimes some of the people who are listening to this kind of get stuck in this idea that they should have known better, or they should have seen it, or there's that camp. But then there's another camp where it's like, and I don't know how else to word this other than, well, at least he doesn't beat me. So it's this idea of like, it's not happening to me, so it's not really happening. But what I think some of your articles, obviously, but also some of your cartoons and your drawings are like kind of dispelling both sides of both of those camps. Like, no, this is what's happening. and I'm not really asking a question, I guess, but other than what I'm trying to understand or wanting to ask is how were you able to get to that place for yourself to what you were just talking about?
Well, that's a
Sorry.
really good question. Um, and this is why I am so fierce about LGBTQIA plus reality, um, is because they are kind of that community is kind of the spearhead of that is exposing a fatal flaw in the church, and that is a
Okay.
gross misunderstanding of what love is. And I've experienced that, even though I'm a straight white cisgendered male, all that. I've experienced that because I felt like I was not allowed to be my authentic self. Growing up, I grew up in a very authoritarian household, and the kind of uh, yeah, I need more therapy, but the kind of churches I gravitated towards were authoritarian with
Sure.
charismatic leaders and so on, and why I did that, but that whole thing was I felt
Controlled or
restricted
restricted? Yeah.
Restricted?
and oppressed, and
Yeah.
I had to hide myself and conceal a lot of myself in order to belong. And so my gay friends and my trans friends and so on feel that at an exponential level
Right.
because of who they are or whatever. So that's why it's all the same problem,
Yeah.
that there's a misunderstanding of what love is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, no,
so
that's good.
I, and if the church doesn't understand what love is, we're in trouble, because shouldn't the church that professes to be, you know, they will know your disciples by your love for one another.
Yeah.
I mean, shouldn't that be one of the primary
Yeah.
characteristics
Yeah.
and values of the church? So that's why I go after that so hard. Um, I, Jesus in the Gospels is quoted as saying that justice is like the sun that shines on everyone. It's like the rain that falls on everyone. They didn't know gravity back then, but it's like gravity that pulls everyone. It's basically saying it's indiscriminate.
Yeah.
It's totally indiscriminate.
Yeah.
And, we associate love with feelings and preference and warm hearts and butterflies in our stomachs, when it's not that at all. It's indiscriminate compassion that just emanates to
Yeah.
all things.
Yeah.
And to exclude some from that's not love. That's just
Yeah.
a complete misunderstanding of what love is.
Yeah.
You know, the parable of Jesus and the sower, talking about the sower and where the seed falls. I think the whole point of that parable, personally, this is my own personal
Yeah,
interpretation,
it's great.
uh, take me to court, but this is what I feel, is that I think when Jesus originally told the story, he says, look at that sower over there sowing the seeds. And they're sowing the seeds, and it goes everywhere
Yeah. That's right.
indiscriminately. It
Yeah.
lands on rocks, goes into the weeds, goes
Yeah.
into the road,
Yeah.
goes into the good soil. It just goes everywhere. I think that was his point.
Yeah.
And where the church, now I've seen some great churches. There are great churches out there, but I'm speaking generally, that if the church needs to have that kind of a indiscriminate global understanding of what love and
Come on.
compassion is.
Come on.
Yeah. Boy,
I love.
that was a rant, but
No, that's
No,
it.
it's good.
That's it.
It's really good.
I folks have heard this story, so I'll tell it quickly. But I describe love as a measureless revelation, by talking about a game I played with my 5-year-old, my then 5-year-old girl, where I said I love you to the trees and back, and then she doubled that, trees and back, the sun, the moon, and stars. Back and forth we go. You know, she says a million billion, I say a googolplex. You know, until I've given her a litany of my love, and then she says, "Daddy," all clever like times. She says, "Daddy times two." And when she said that,
Yeah.
I heard Holy Spirit. I heard God say to me, "That's the gospel. That's what love is. It is.
Yeah.
You think you can measure it, and at the moment you think you get your arms around it, a 5-year-old can blow it up with times two."
Yeah.
And what you said about the seed, I agree with you 100%. I was raised in the context of separation to listen to that parable through the idea that that he keeps a record of wrongs, that love somehow keeps a record, that God is in Christ, not reconciling the world to himself. He is counting our sins against us.
Yeah.
So when you
Yeah.
read it that way, then you're the soil, and it's really tough because 75% of soil sucks.
Yeah.
And so my whole life was, God help me be good soil tomorrow because I screwed it up again today, right?
Yeah.
And living in that religious construct. And I remember the day that, and you're right, it's tied to love. It's tied to this revelation of a love you can't get your arms around, where I realized, oh, he is sowing over every bit of soil. And then if you realize that love is the incorruptible seed, you can actually read it linear and go, oh, when it lands on a path, it actually is transformative. And the path can become rocky, and it's transformative, becomes until we've got soil and aspects of our life that has good soil that can then have a crop that is 90, 60, 30 fold.
Yeah.
This
Like
is,
if the sower was obsessed about waste,
yeah,
they would go and plant every tiny seed in the furrows, but he doesn't care. And this love just gets spread everywhere.
well,
And
and it's a
have you
measureless.
ever been?
It's
Sorry.
measureless, so he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
That idea that you can waste love when it's times two, you just can't get your arms around it.
We have the same thing with our daughter. She's in her 30s now, and we still
Yeah.
play it.
Yeah.
So it's like, love you, I love you more, and then
Yeah.
we say, I loved you first.
Yeah.
Like that.
That's the game.
Yeah.
I love the
So one of
game.
the things that I'm hearing you both are talking about is like abundance, really. You know, and if you're operating from a separated mindset or a separated worldview, whatever word you want to use there, scarcity is going to be one of your tent
Yeah.
pegs.
Yes.
But if you're operating from a connected mindset or a connected worldview, abundance is going to be the tent peg there. And so both of you, that's what I keep hearing. It's like measureless love, but like if he was really concerned about it, the seeds, he'd planting one at a time. But
Yeah.
he has abundance for us, for all of
Yeah.
us.
You know,
So
Brooke, have you ever been to Niagara Falls?
I have.
I remember, like I lived only a couple hours away from there, and
Same. Yeah.
we went sometimes, and we went on down to the bottom one time. I guess we were on the boat or something, and you're looking at the falls, and you're thinking, this is what I'm thinking. Where does all that water come from? Like it's endless, and it just keeps coming. Like where's it all? Like it's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
insane. It's overwhelmingly insane how
Yes.
much water is pouring over those falls, and it just does not stop.
It doesn't ever stop.
Yeah.
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 No, that's good.
That I've had that feeling. I've been there. It's you have one of your drawings. It's Jesus with a heart, maybe a basket full of hearts,
Yeah.
and he's sowing them. I'm looking at that right now. It feels like that works.
Yeah, that's called the sower, and
The sower.
it's kind of cheesy, but I like it. I like it.
I like it too. Let's talk about that thing in you that's fierce. I wrote a book called Leaving and Finding Jesus a couple of years ago, and it was directly for those who are deconstructing the Emmaus Road approach to deconstruction, where we steward the burning heart, and in that book I write about Jesus flipping tables. And for me, if God is love, and by the way, we love because He first loved. So the whole point is that we are awakening to His love, because you can't give away what you don't have. And so if God is love, and then He says all the law and the prophets break down to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, your neighbors, you love yourself. Then He said there's no greater love that one would lay his life down for a friend, and He goes on to do that. So in the context of love, Jesus revealing that all creation is with him at the cross, that he's laid his life down for all creation. And I will say this, you and I are on the same page that all creation are sheep. And I know you could speak to that we are all his sheep. We are all part of the flock, whether you've prayed a prayer or not. But I'd love to hear you say that, but stick on the flipping tables theme. For me, the idea that I can trust somebody like Jesus who is stepping into a situation where there is disparity, where there's power, there's a power dynamic. There's obviously the abuses taking place. There's the vulnerable that are being used, right? The whole situation that's taking place there. The religious structures of the day, and being able to flip a table where he also, it's not like he didn't lay his life down for the people on the other side of the table. And so he's flipping tables, but he's doing it in the spirit of this love that is a measureless love, and so therefore can be trusted. I feel like I see that constantly in your work. You've got, I know, one where Jesus is just flipping tables. Maybe a series, because I've also seen one where he's teaching women how to flip tables, but could you speak to that, because there's a fierceness to that. That at the same time isn't reaction. I don't see Jesus reacting. I see him responding, still in the context of a greater love. If that's what I'm trying to say. Hey guys, I hope the podcast is blessing. Family Stories, our nonprofit, started 10 years ago. The goal was to make media content catalytic for an encounter with the love of God, and I think we're doing it. Had no idea what that would all entail, and in the last year has been blown away by what's happened around this podcast. Rethinking God with Tacos. The community that's gathered, the relationships and friendships that have been made, the conversations that have been had, the impact has been actually quite profound in our lives. And I'm daily hearing from folks who have been encouraged because of the conversations being had. Catalytic for an encounter with the love of God. Listen, we're listener supported, and as this thing has grown, it's taken a little bit more of my time I love to give. And we've also had folks come along to help, and I'm so grateful for that. But it all works because you guys partnering with us and giving. And so I'm grateful for those who have partnered in that way, incredibly grateful, and in inviting you who are watching this now, if you've been impacted, if this has blessed you, and you'd like to see it continue to improve and expand, I'd invite you to give. You can go to afamilystory.org, afamilystory.org. We're a nonprofit, and so you can give there. You can also sign up for our mailing list, keep up with us, all things tacos, all things A Family Story, conferences, new books, Zoom calls, all of the amazing ways by which we're connecting, the Facebook community. So thankful for you guys. Familystory.org. Sign up for our mailing list. Partner with us by giving, and we'll continue to have those conversations that are hopefully like the one you're listening to now, catalytic for an encounter with our Father's affection. All right, guys, back to the podcast. Love you. See you soon. Yeah.
So I'm always very cautious about. I want people to understand that story in the context of the Old Testament prophets, that Jesus was behaving in a way that, say, Amos would, rather than the anti-Semitic idea that he was overturning the tables of Judaism.
Right.
And the Jewish religion. So I always want to sort of, that's a disclaimer I want to mention.
No, that's
right
good. Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
And
That's
because
there's
for
no
me,
us and them.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's not against the religion as much as the exploitation of the poor,
Yes.
and the abuse of religion.
Yes.
I mean, because I think one of the cool things that the gospel communicates is that, like, one time Jesus is said to have an exchange with Jewish leaders, and he's saying, you guys measure dill and everything right down to the grain, and but you neglect the poor. Like,
Right.
why? You can do that, but also take care of the poor.
Yeah.
So it's not like he's saying stop all that
Yeah.
nonsense.
Yeah.
It's a waste of time.
Yeah.
Take care of the poor. For him, it's okay to measure out your dill and measure out this and all this kind of thing, and count your pennies. But please just take care of the poor as well.
Yeah.
And so I think that to me is a gracious kind of an insight into what's going on is that I don't think Jesus came, although a lot of people would like to think so, but I don't think Jesus came to overturn the Jewish religion,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
Yeah.
was kind of like a reformer, like the Old Testament prophets were. I hope I'm in that same tradition of I I'm not an enemy of the church or the enemy of Christianity or any religion, uh, but I think our job is to challenge religion and the church to obey its calling and to serve us, to serve people. Like it's a creature and we're to have dominion over it. It's to serve us.
Yeah.
And yet we find that too often we're serving it. We're slaves to it rather than it serving us. So that I think is the prophetic role that Jesus had and the prophets had was challenging the principalities and the powers and the authorities and the church and everything to live up to its calling to serve and to
Yeah.
love. And so that's how I see the flipping the tables story kind of in that context.
Right. That's good. That's good.
Because I know there if you take that understanding and reading the Gospels, I think you see you read between the lines, because I do think there is some anti-Semitism in the New Testament. But if you read between the lines, you can see that Jesus was a reformer,
Yeah.
and although he didn't intend to be, he was just telling stories
Yeah.
and presenting an alternative way of life
Yeah.
that challenged the status quo and got him in trouble.
The
Not
the
like
uh,
anything that you're doing, right?
the
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I, it's funny because I am a peacemaker. Like I don't like conflict.
yeah.
I'm very uncomfortable with conflict. And I just want to be loved, and I'm very kind. If anybody meets me in person, I'm very kind and gentle and soft spoken, and but sometimes my cartoons don't come across that way. I
I think
know.
they're great.
Yeah.
I love
I
it.
I love that story. Yeah, and yeah. That's why you're hiding. That's why you're way up in the northeast, right? So
Yeah, one of my mentors, never met him, but read all of his books and everything, is Thomas Merton, you've probably heard of,
yeah.
and the Trappist monk. And he was really my first spiritual mentor. And I think he had a huge influence on my life.
Yeah.
No, I don't think, I know he
Right.
had a huge
Yeah.
influence in my life.
Yeah.
And, he lived in a little hermitage in the backwoods of Kentucky and was contemplating before his death over in Asia. He was contemplating building a hermitage somewhere in Alaska, way out in nowhere, and but he had a huge influence
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
including not just spiritually, but and not just Roman Catholic, but across religious lines and
Yeah.
also politically and
Yeah.
artistically and everything. So I think it doesn't matter where you are, if you can get your voice out there somehow, then and if it has any effect, it will do what it's meant to do. And so I feel very fortunate that I'm way up here in Canada and live very remotely, and I hardly see any people, and yet I can get my voice out there thanks to the internet.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So what would you say? Like here's the platform right here. Like what would be the one thing you would want everyone to take away today?
Well, I think Jason hit on it, was this let's stop drawing lines between one another and love one another. Figure out how to love everyone. Like that's the paradox of community, though, isn't it? Like um, I have an online community called the Lasting Supper, and one of our values one of our values is we wrestle with this dynamic. How can I be free without violating your freedom? How can you be free without violating my freedom?
Yeah,
Like, how can I be my most authentic self without hurting you, and
yeah,
vice versa?
yeah,
If we can stay in that conversation uh, and navigate that day
yeah,
by day,
yeah,
I think that's what makes for a healthy community. And
Yeah, that's
so,
good.
yeah, and so that's why I really do feel that we need to understand what love is, and
yeah,
practice that in real time. And so that's what I'm trying to communicate.
yeah,
And here's the thing, this is what makes it difficult, is that when you say everybody's welcome except people who don't welcome everybody, like
right,
that's
yeah,
that's a hard pill,
yeah,
but it's true. And people who want to hate certain people or exclude certain people don't understand that. They don't understand that. So that when
yeah,
I say, if you're going to be mean or cruel or unkind or racist or homophobic or Islamophobic or misogynist, I'm going to delete your comment. And if you keep it up, I'll block you. Oh, you claim to love everybody and include everybody except me. Well, that's how it works. I mean, you know, I'm not excluding you, you're excluding yourself.
Well, love doesn't mean no boundaries.
Yeah.
I think you're talking about the difference between a community that you're endeavoring to steward, because we also have an online community, and the only rule is kindness, and from
Yeah.
in kindness we can have interaction, but the nature of stewarding community is not the definition of the nature of who Jesus is, which is a different the reality is I think that's maybe what I was running at, even in him flipping tables, is the fact that even though he's flipping tables, confronting what is happening in that space, he's doing it in the spirit of other-centered, self-giving love. That person on the other side of the table is still in him at the cross, and that there's still and so to delineate the two makes a whole lot of sense, because you're talking about relationship and creating space for people and safe spaces for community. And I completely understand that. Well, endeavoring to understand a Jesus who is a welcoming, transformative reality in all people's lives. If that
Hmm.
makes sense, is that fair?
Yeah. And this is another, it's a weird thing to me that I've discovered that when I was a pastor and I tried to practice, listen, I don't want to be a top down kind of pastor. I'm here for you if you need me. Um, I'll help you out when you need me, but I really want you to learn how to drive yourself.
It's good.
And so I'm here for you for that.
Yeah,
And I had a lot of people, I thought that would be a really popular idea, but it's not a popular idea.
no, no,
I actually had people sitting down in across from my desk and my pastor studying, telling me, we pay you to tell us what to believe. And that's what most people want,
yeah,
it seems.
Yeah.
And so, on one hand, you scratch your heads thinking Jesus was such a great guy, and yet he decreased in popularity. What's up with
Mm-hmm.
that?
Right.
That's why.
Right. Right.
And because the more authentic you become, and therefore unique
Yeah.
you become, the less conformative you
Mm-hmm.
are. And when you continually empower other people to take
It's good.
responsibility for their own lives,
Mm-hmm.
that's not a warm fuzzy feeling for most people.
Well, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what because I do feel like there is and whether this language works across, there's an awakening to this Jesus, this other-centered, self-giving Jesus, this that invites you. Who do you say that I am? Invites you into that kind of a conversation, and you can't do that in the institute. So you're describing what has become known as the deconstruction movement, because I think folks haven't been able to find. It's the hypocrisy, right? The God of love that we were raised with, and we know we've experienced along the way. You've touched and tasted of this perfect love, this love that I talked about with my daughter. These moments where you realize God is love, and then you're taught that God is love from the pulpit, and then at the same time, he's participating in all kinds of exclusions, hierarchies of exclusion, and there's lots of seeming counting of sins. And for instance, Jesus finds the blind man, and the disciples want to know who sinned. That
Mm-hmm.
he's blind, and Jesus says, "Wrong question."
Yeah.
And so I think this deconstruction movement is coming to a place where folks are starting to ask the right question, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. They're looking for safe places to ask the right question. I mean, you're meeting and connecting with, I would imagine, even the group that you're with. Most of them might at one point have used that term, if they're not still using it.
What what term?
Deconstruction.
Oh yeah, no, yeah,
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 yeah.
absolutely.
So what do you? I saw an article where you recommended 4 books, but you did it deconstruction books, but you also were loath to do it.
You didn't want to
And
mention them.
at the same time, speak to that. Speak to what you've experienced in this movement that is, to
Okay,
me, an awakening to the goodness of God. Is really what I believe is
okay,
happening.
all right. I'm not willing to die on this hill,
Okay.
but uh, I started using the word deconstruction. I was asked to read some textbooks on hermeneutics, and I was to go to this workshop on hermeneutics, how to read the Bible, and I was given a stack of textbooks that I had to order and read before I went there, and it was all criticizing erroneous uh, hermeneutics, and one of them was deconstruction hermeneutic,
Yeah.
which was founded by, and the word was invented by Jacques Derrida, the French philosopher. And what I was reading his stuff, and I started feeling like, holy smokes! I know I'm supposed to not agree with him, but he's exactly describing what I'm going through.
Yeah.
It had
Right.
the reverse effect. I became a convert,
Right.
and I started using that word deconstruction because it basically means you question everything right down to the root,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
So, for an
Right.
example, would be when somebody says, Jesus said, blah, blah, blah. Actually, there's too many problems with that statement. The,
Right. Right.
so we deconstruct that statement. Really, what you mean is somebody claiming to be Luke claims
Sure.
Jesus said something
Right.
30 years earlier,
Right.
and and plus you're trusting the Greek
Sure.
manuscript from which that was taken, and then uh, the versions, the different
Yep.
translations that have
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
through,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
your reception of it. There's just so many layers of problems,
Yes.
and so that's where my deconstruction began way back when I graduated from seminary. I was just a
Yeah.
young man, and I suddenly questioned the inspiration of Scripture. And anyway, so in 2008, I started using that word deconstruction to refer to my journey
Yeah.
of questioning all my beliefs and everything.
Yeah.
And people said, "Oh, you're sounding like a deconstructionist." I'm like, Yes, I am. And when I left the ministry in 2010, I was so lonely. It was like there was nobody. So I started the Lasting Supper in 2012 for people who were deconstructing.
That's great.
And and it's still going to this day. So that whole deconstruction thing, I claim it's not a movement.
Yeah.
It looks like a movement, but
Yeah.
it's not a movement because people all down through the ages have
100%.
deconstructed.
Yeah.
It's nothing new
Yeah.
at all. It's
Yeah.
just normal spiritual growth that's
Yeah.
healthy, where you ask, should I believe this without question or not? And
Yeah.
and so that to me, the whole deconstruction thing is actually something that we ought to be doing. It's healthy.
Yeah.
The reason why deconstruction is a problem is because the church doesn't provide space for that.
That's
Yes.
it.
That's the
Yes.
problem.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would just be, oh yeah, David's just going through stuff right now. He's not sure what he believes. And they're, oh yeah, I've been there, done that. No big
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah.
But because you fall away from orthodoxy, then you're a heretic, and then you're excommunicated.
Yeah.
You know.
It
Yeah.
was interesting. One of my kids was asking me about, like, when I was younger, if I would get into fights with my friends if we didn't believe the same thing. I
Oh
said,
yeah.
no, not at all, actually. That didn't happen. I
Yeah.
said, this is all like lately. I don't even know what lately would be, but, he's like, well, when Clinton was running for presidency, did your friends care if you didn't like him or not, or if you wanted
Oh yeah.
Bush
Yeah.
and all of that? I'm like, nobody cared. Nobody cared, and there wasn't really any arguments about those things. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because now all I see is a demand for agreement,
Yeah.
in relationships.
Yeah.
And I can't say that's the only thing I see. Obviously, there's other relationships I see where seeking understanding is important, but I see that a lot more in the demand for agreement versus understanding. That's what I hear from you.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think things have changed though since those days, since the old days,
This is the old days.
where every person now has a voice and a platform, and they therefore have some kind of authority. You know what I mean? They can. People with the worst ideas can have the biggest following.
Yes.
I can't explain it, but that's just the way things have become now. And plus, I, like for example, I remember back in the Reagan era, the deep seated unrest that was happening for a lot of people because of what was happening in American politics and all that. I kind of was outside of that, circle, and I kind of flew under the radar because I was busy studying, blah 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 blah. But so it's almost like things are heating up again, and but there's way more megaphones out there than there were.
That's
back then.
true. It's good.
And we're just hearing from everybody and getting just overwhelming cacophony of noise, right?
Yeah. I am encouraged. Though, because while I agree with you that it's not a movement, I believe that there is. To me, it's just repenting. It's rethinking. It's what we do on this podcast. It's a good news. If I'm having a flawed thought, I can have a better one. I can change the way I think and come into alignment with how love thinks about this. That's the goal of this podcast is, hey, can we have a better thought about the goodness of who God is and who we are together today than we did yesterday? And so, I would argue for me, or I would say that for me, I was deconstructing long before the term
Yeah, me too.
existed.
Yeah.
I appreciate that there has been some language put around it and some writing put around it. And I noticed my book wasn't one of the 4 books. I'm just throwing that out there.
I should mention, yeah.
I saw Brad Jerzak. There's so many, Out of the Embers was the first book, right? I'm familiar with Brad. I know you guys are friends, but so many voices that
Yeah.
are speaking to what I believe we are discovering again as a church, that Jesus is what God has to say about himself. That ultimately he is the hermeneutic, if you will, the method by which we interpret all things, including Scripture. And I appreciate that we can deconstruct right down and parse through all of that. But ultimately, for me, I do have a certainty. It's that there is no greater love that one would lay his life down for a friend.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And in that certainty, I can live in the mystery of everything else, and I can live generous towards all people, because ultimately love is trustworthy because it's other focused and self-giving. It makes room for everyone at the table, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, the reason why I was reluctant, the reason why I was reluctant to mention 4 books is because it goes against what I believe deconstruction is, and basically it's you finding your personal spiritual independence. Like we we can find we can find food anywhere.
Hmm.
yeah.
It doesn't have to be a theology book. And
Yes.
you know, when people are deconstructed, say, "What should I read? What should I read?" It's like, and I'm gonna copy Brad Jerzak here, but I say, read whatever the fuck you want. Like this is the point.
You did
This
that
is
on
the
purpose.
point. And like one book that changed my mind about the environment and caring for the world, and being a good steward of creation and all this, was The Road by Cormac McCarthy. You know the book?
Okay. Yeah.
You might have seen the movie or
The
whatever with
movie. Yeah. Yeah.
Viggo
Yeah.
Mortensen.
It's
Um,
profound,
Devastatingly dark,
devastating. Yeah. Yeah.
depressing movie.
Yeah.
But I
Beautiful
started
though.
composting and doing separating the cardboard from the metals and blah 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 blah. That changed my mind about being a good steward of the earth.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it wasn't intended for that, but that's what
Yeah.
it did.
Yeah.
So like I tell people, like, you used to be told, I remember pastors coming up to me and saying, you shouldn't read that. You
Huh.
shouldn't
Hmm.
read this book on Zen
Yeah.
because there's plenty
Yeah.
of Christian books to read.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But now you're free to read whatever you want and
Yeah.
get food from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Like The Shack. You weren't allowed to
Yeah,
read that.
Yeah. Yeah.
so
There's
funny.
so many things we weren't allowed to read, man. It's
I know.
unbelievable. Interstellar is mine. Interstellar
Well, that's cool. Cool
is
movie.
my
Yeah.
invitation into thinking outside of time and space. But
Yeah. Cool stuff.
man, it's good. The time has flown by,
Yes.
and, and
Wow. Really?
yeah,
Already?
it's hard to believe. I don't.
It's been too much fun.
This has been wonderful. I am so
This has been the
grateful.
fastest podcast ever so far.
Oh, good. Well, I'll take that as a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me ask you this, because it's in the title. Oh, by the way, the thanks for the F word. We'd let you know that the only other person that had done that on the podcast was Brad, and so
And
now
I'm
you guys
Canadian.
can,
Mhm.
Battle
Yeah,
for that.
yeah.
my fellow Canadian,
Mm.
love it. We talk tacos because we are a relational community, and all good things take place around a table.
Hmm.
And fellowship around food is a big deal. Of course, tacos is a lot of fun. It seems to
Hmm.
be the universal language of all people. First, do you like tacos? And second, do you have a taco story that we can tell?
Well, I'm in Eastern Canada,
Uh huh.
and it's hard to find good Mexican food here, but
Uh huh.
there is a restaurant nearby that used to serve fish tacos,
Come on.
and they were amazing. Like, they were
Mm.
just really, really, really good. And I've heard people say that they're the best fish tacos they've ever had. However, uh, we have 2 sons, and they both lived in Boulder for a time. So we've
Got
been
a
down to
Colorado
visit
shirt
them.
on.
And there's a place in Boulder called Rio Grande
Come on,
that
man.
has steak tacos,
Hmm.
and I think about them quite often. So yeah, they're just amazing. But that's a
So
long way to travel for a taco.
carne
Right.
asada steak with cilantro. Are you a cilantro guy?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah. They're
onion.
very simple. Very, very simple.
Yeah, yeah. The best ones are on
And
flour or corn.
they also had tequila there. I said they had a lot of tequila. They have this great bar, and with a like floor to ceiling glass and bottles of all
Nice.
kinds and tequila. I'm saying, what's your most expensive tequila? And he mentioned the name. I can't remember it now because, yeah, I'll never be able to buy it. I said, how much is that? He said, it's $250 a shot.
Wow.
Woo! Did you have one? Did you have a shot?
No,
No, no, of course not.
no.
I'll do high end tequila, not that high end, but I'm a whiskey guy at
I'm a
heart.
whiskey
So,
guy too.
are you?
Yeah.
Bourbon, whiskey? Yeah, yeah.
Well, I like bourbon, but now I'm on to rye. Like
Yes.
Rye.
so
Rye is good.
single malts in Canada are very popular. The Scottish whiskey,
Yeah, yeah,
and I used to favor that. And then I got into bourbon,
yeah,
and yeah, there's a ton of good bourbons out there.
yeah.
And like one of my favorites is Heaven's Door or Angel's Envy or
Angel's
something.
envy.
And then I tried some rye, and I thought because I sometimes I found bourbon a little bit too sweet for me.
Yeah, yeah.
And this rye comes along,
Come on.
and
Yes.
wow, it's like
You're
it's the
speaking.
spot.
You're speaking my language. Angel envy rye actually is pretty good.
It is good. I had that. I was
Yeah,
recently down in Columbus
yeah,
speaking,
yeah.
and a guy said, "Let's go out for a drink," and he said, "What's your?" I said, "Well, that Angel's
That one right there.
envy is really." And he said, "Let's get some." So it
I
was.
could have this conversation for a minute, but I think we would enjoy each other's company.
What's your favorite, Brooke?
Stranahan's, the yellow label. It's a Colorado whiskey.
And you,
Stranahan's. Yes.
Stranahan's. So there's the diamond, the black label, which is supposed to be better, but I like the yellow label better, actually.
Okay. So it's a rye.
Yes.
is that the
I'm
one you
gonna
got me?
check that out. I've seen that.
Yes, that's good.
No.
Yeah, I think I still have some of that.
Yeah, that's my favorite. And then I
Yeah.
like rye, any rye. I shouldn't say any because there's some I just like don't like, but rye is the one I lean towards.
Yeah, I like a rye that's a little more than 40%, like maybe around 45%.
Come on.
And that's a sweet
Yep.
spot for me.
Yep.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
good.
I'm restraining myself right now.
I got a bottle of Sazerac out there that's waiting for me now.
Oh, good. Well, you need to go do it. Before you do that, though, how do
Yeah.
people find you? It's
Yes.
was it nakedpastor.com?
Yeah, so if you search naked pastor, but make sure you use one word, not two words, because if you Google naked pastor, you're going to see naked pastors. If you do one word, naked pastor, that's me, and I'm naked pastor across all social media. I'm everywhere, and but my base camp is nakedpastor.com.
Yeah,
So
and lots of beautiful art there. We didn't even talk about
Yes.
you. I mean, you also have all kinds of other art that's just stunning.
thank you.
Blog there, all kinds of things that would bless people and eventually give them language to the goodness of God. So,
And the Lasting Supper, is that on there as well, right?
Yes, thelasting-supper.com
Okay.
is another site that I have. It's a membership site, and it's been going now for 12 years, and it's just a beautiful community, and yeah, I love it. I don't know how I could have survived without it, so
Yeah. No,
it's been
I
great.
understand.
Yeah.
David,
You know
thankful
what,
for you.
Jason? I
Yes,
thought
sir.
you had a backdrop, but
Ah.
it's getting dark there. You actually live on the water?
Well, it's nice. It's water. It's my backyard, but it's trees. But it's all ferns or all evergreens,
Okay.
and I'm in
Oh, I saw
Charlotte.
water through there.
Yeah, it's just the sky. Beautiful.
Oh,
We are a lake community, but not living on the lake. That's like
okay.
$250.
Yeah.
Uh, what's the
Miles?
drink? Whatever the $250.
Oh, the tequila, the high-end tequila, the shot.
It's not a lake, but no, yeah, it got dark as we were talking. But I love if I can to be in the backyard. This is where I write and
Cool.
where we do podcasts when we can. So, man, honored, David, that you took the time to come on and speak to this audience, our audience. And maybe we can do it again, brother. If you're ever in the Charlotte area, coffee, or better yet, bourbon and whiskey on
Yeah,
top.
that would be great. I'd love that. I don't know if I'll ever go to Florida, though. I don't know.
I get it.
Sorry.
I understand.
Crazy days, crazy days. Oh, let there be balance. Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
bro.
Good to
Yeah,
Oh, it was so fun.
It was great. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
the call, bro.